everyone and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Irene and today I'll show you how to make a high-end looking designer table lamp out of an old cheap thrifted lamp, some shells and self-hardening clay. Once upon a time on Pinterest, I came across a beautiful tumble lamp with a shell base. I really loved it, and as my mom had asked me to make her a new bedside lamp, I thought it would be a perfect choice. The lamp was out of stock already and the original price tag was quite high as well, but you remember, what you can't buy, you can DIY. So I decided to DIY it, of course. I'm going to make the base using the same technique I did for the anthropology candles which I made recently by sticking shells into a layer of self-hardening clay. I needed a base as well, so I searched through our local Craigslist and quickly found a small lamp with a rounded base, which was just perfect for this project, although I would have to change the lampshade. I've bought several packages of small shells in a craft shop. If you live by the sea, you can pick them for free on the shore, and another budget-friendly option is to use pistachio shells. I'll also use self-hardening clay. You can either buy it or make it yourself. I'll leave the link to the video with the recipe in the description box below. I'll work in small sections so the clay doesn't get dry too quickly. I'm kneading a piece of clay, rolling it into a flat pancake about half a centimeter thick, smearing the side of the lamp with white glue and placing the clay pancake over it. And after that, I'm sticking the shells into the clay to make a kind of a flower. In the middle there are two shells facing each other, and then I'm adding more shells around them like petals. Closer to the center, I'm attaching the shells almost vertically, and I'm using smaller shells. And closer to the edges of the flower, I'm attaching larger shells and sticking them more horizontally. After all the clay is covered with shells, I'm rolling out a new pancake, attaching it to the lamp base and covering it with shells, and so on. First, I'm covering the widest part of the lamp, the equator of the bowl with the flowers. I've made 5 flowers like this. I haven't made any markup here. I didn't think about this in advance, and actually I think I should have. The pattern would be more accurate and all the flowers would have the same size if I drew the location and the size of all the flowers over the base in advance, although some unevenness doesn't spoil the lamp. Nevertheless, natural materials look fine even if the pattern is not perfect. When sticking the shells in places, I've got clay being pushed out a little in between the shells, and I'm smoothing back these areas to even the surface. I'm doing this with a small brush dipped in white glue. After the entire equator was filled, I trimmed the size of all the flowers to make them more or less the same, and I continued covering the top of the lamp with shells. Here I tried to place the flowers of the top row in between the flowers of the middle row. Didn't work out everywhere. I wish I had made 6, not 5 flowers in the middle row. So don't repeat my mistakes and mark the base before attaching the shells. But despite this, it already looks very cool. Finally, I'm covering all the gaps between the flowers and the top with small pieces of clay and more shells. After that, I'm leaving the lamp to dry overnight so as not to move or smash anything when working with the lower part. I was left with the bottom row, and I'm filling it exactly the same way, turning the lamp upside down. Here, of course, it's almost a balancing act as it stands on the light socket. I have to constantly hold the lamp so that it wouldn't fall. At the very end, I ran out of clay and I took another package, but it turned out to be not white but yellowish, even though it says white on the package. Fortunately, this is not visible in the bottom row at all. After that, I let the lamp dry well. If you use pistachio shells, you'll have to paint them as well. And while it's drying, I'll make the lampshade. As I said, the one that was on the lamp originally didn't suit me, so I'll make a new drum-shaped one, as on the original photo. Somehow we don't have any drum-shaped lampshades sold in stores here. I'll make the base of the lampshade out of wire. I've picked up a frying pan of a suitable diameter and I'm making 2 wire rings on it. I've ended up with rings of 12 inches. I'm fixing the rings with masking tape for now. I'm also making 3 pieces of wire 12 inches long for making lamp-shaped spokes. Next, I'll draw a template. I'm circling the pen on a sheet of paper. I'll use it to check the final size of the rings, as they should be perfectly the same. Next, I'm drawing the lampshade side view, in other words, a rectangle. Its length is 12 inches, this is the diameter of the lampshade, and I'll make it 7 inches high. I'm marking the middle of the rectangle, the central axis where the light bulb is located. A light socket is about 1.5 inches in diameter, so I'm tracing 3/4 of an inch to the right and to the left from the central axis. And finally, I'm marking 2 inches from the bottom of the rectangle and drawing 2 inclined lines from the center. These are the future spokes of the lampshade. I'm tapping the wire pieces with a hammer on a piece of wood to make them even. I'm measuring about 3 inches along the wire and bending the wire here at 90 degrees. You'll get something like a poker. I'm bending the short end of the poker slightly so that the wire lies along the circumference of the lampshade. The poker has turned into a scythe. I hope anyone remembers what a hand scythe looks like. I'm bending all the 3 wire pieces like this. Now I'm attaching the wire piece to the template and bending the other end at 90 degrees, but in the opposite direction. It turned out such a squiggle. I'm also bending all the pieces like this. And finally, I'm also bending the short tips using the light socket as a guide to get a kind of a hook at the end. I'm trimming and bending all 3 pieces to make them exactly the same, and now I'll assemble the base. A couple of years ago I made a lampshade according to the same principles and assembled it using hot glue then, but this time I've decided to try to solder the parts. I did this for the first time in my life and unfortunately with not much success. The wire I use is galvanized and the soldering iron is not very powerful and it couldn't heat the wire well enough. I've soldered the rings quite firmly after much effort, but things went worse with the spokes. But first things first. After all the rings are ready, I've divided the circumference of the template into 6 parts by marking the radius around the circumference, and then I'm transferring 3 marks to the wire ring with a permanent marker. This is what the finished part will look like. Now I need to solder the spokes to the ring. I'm assembling the frame temporarily using masking tape to fix the correct position of the spokes and begin working. Alas, nothing worked for me. The wire apparently didn't warm up strongly enough and the solder simply crumbled from it. I managed to somehow fix only 1 spoke, so after suffering for 3 hours, I gave up. I removed the solder from the wire, degreased it, and I'll connect it as before, using hot glue. I'm wrapping all the junctions with threads. Thus, I'm fixing the part in the right position, and at the same time, hot glue sticks much better to threads than to metal, so the connection will be much stronger. In order for the hooks in the center to assemble into a ring, I'm tweaking them slightly with pliers. And be sure to check if the ring fits the light socket. It's better to make it a little wider than necessary, as hot glue will provide additional thickness. After that, I'm coating all the joints with hot glue carefully. I'm applying it in a thin, even layer to cover all the threads and wrap the metal part in a glue cover, as if in insulation, from all the sides. After everything is covered with glue, I'm painting the base. In general, this is not necessary, the glued places will not be visible, but I still want to cover the glue. I'll make the base of the lampshade from a thin sheet of plastic. I've bought it in an art store. It is called Plastic for Modeling. You can replace it with thick paper or thin cardboard. You'll need a strip of 7 by 40 inches approximately, and I'm cutting off the piece I need. You can glue the plastic into a ring using double-sided sticky tape. I've run out of it, so I'll use aerosol adhesive. Finally, I'm cutting fabric. I'll use a dense textured cream-colored cotton, and I'm cutting off a strip a little wider than a plastic one. I'm making it 8 inches wide to have half an inch extra from each side. And now I'll put everything together. I'm hot gluing the wire ring along the edge of the plastic ring. You can also use a thin strip of double-sided tape here. On the other side, I'm hot gluing the ring with the spokes. Now the plastic base holds its shape well. Let's check again how it fits. And all that is left is to cover the lampshade with fabric. I'm applying aerosol adhesive to the fabric. By the way, I didn't like the brand I bought this time. It soaked the fabric easily and didn't glue it well. Anyway, I'm attaching the fabric to the base to have the same fabric allowances on both sides. In place where the fabric meets its beginning, I'm hot gluing it, bending the edge to get a nice and even seam. And now the only thing to do is to trim the allowances. There are two options here. The first option is to hot glue the edge of the fabric and then hot glue the folded allowance onto the lampshade. I did this on one side and I didn't really like it. It turns out a little less neat. And the second option, which I like more, I'm just poking the edge of the fabric under the base ring using a flat screwdriver. The fabric is held only by friction here, but due to the fact that it is stuck very tightly, you'll get a neat and nice edge. In the end, you can iron the fabric gently right on the lampshade to make the surface stretch a little. I'm attaching the finished lampshade on the lamp, and we're done. In total, it took me about 600 grams of shells, which were about $11, an old thrifted lamp, which was $3, a little more than 500 grams of self-hardening clay, a couple of yards of wire, a strip of plastic and fabric that I already had at home, which is about $25 in total. I think it turned out to be very similar to the original lamp. What do you think? Of course, I had issues with the lampshade, but if you use a ready-made one, the base itself is very quick and easy to make, but it looks just gorgeous. Well, I hope you liked today's video. Please let me know what you think of it down below. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in my next one. Bye!